The good news about retirement income from old Christine Benz at Morningstar. A couple of y'all have sent this to me, Dateline February 3rd, 2021. It's an odd article, actually. I got more negative news than good news when reading it. So let's dive into this. And look, I'm a fan of Christine, and I follow her podcast, The Long View, on podcasts, wherever you get your podcast. It's an odd article. Do they put comments on here? I guess not. That's too bad. All right. So let's go into this. It's a very odd article. It's almost it's weird. All right. So let's read this. When it comes to retirement income, I've got good news and I've got bad news. Chances are you've heard the bad news, but I'll repeat it just in case. Thanks largely to low starting bond yields, which in turn depress a portfolio's return to potential, new retirees should start with a lower withdrawal rate than the standard 4%. Doing so will cut the odds that they'll prematurely deplete their funds over 25 to 30-year retirement time. The sobering for people just embarking on retirement, but there's a good news story too. A lower starting withdrawal percentage is advisable largely because core investments have performed so well for so long. They're inflated. That means at the very same time investors are being urged to lower their withdrawal rates, most investors' portfolios are enlarged. Because the lower withdrawing rates is calculated on a larger amount, the net effect is apt to be minimal. Okay, that's good. The drumbeat of bad news about withdrawal rates started in earnest in 2013. Where Finke, I think it's Finke, I heard somebody call him that the other day, and Blanchett is actually David Blanchett. I'm a big fan of all those guys. Had written a paper in Social Science Research Network, SSRN. Basically, we find the probability of success for a 40% equity allocation with a 4% withdrawal rate over a 30-year period of time to be approximately 48%. Well, that's not what the 4% rule is based on a 40% equity allocation. So I'm not quite sure why they're only got a 40% equity allocation. That's odd to me. All right. Of course, equities have performed well since then. That doesn't make sense. Their whole paper was basically indicative that you'd have a 3.2 safe withdrawal rate given the low bond yields at that time, which are still now even lower. While yields have declined, that boosts bond prices, a positive for bond fund holders, especially. Well, it'll come back. Retirees who reined in spending 8 years ago in anticipation of an unforgiving market environment would have done so prematurely. Let's see. Wade Faust stood with the assertion that the 4% starting withdrawal rate was too rich, particularly given the Fed's ultra-low interest rate policy. So he says it should push you towards something like 3%. And then Christine says it's hard to find much at fault with that logic. Yes, bond yields have been low for quite a while, but a strong equity market and declining yields have effectively supported a higher in-retirement withdrawal rates because of that. So yes, lower bonds but higher portfolio values is a wash essentially. But that doesn't mean a lower withdrawal rate. On the positive side, we're talking about withdrawal rate, specifically the percentage you can take from your portfolio in year one. As it happens, the caution about lower withdrawal rates coincides with the periods when many people's investments have risen. That means for many new retirees today, taking a smaller percentage, 3.2% on a $1 million portfolio as opposed to 4% on an $800,000 portfolio, doesn't necessarily translate into a reduction in standard of living. I agree, and she gives a couple examples, which I'm not going to talk about. Now, new retirees in 2031 or at some point in the future may get a crack at a higher safe withdrawal rate because that would be because equity valuations have contracted or bond yields have gone up, which would probably have reduced their portfolio values. In other words, higher sustaining withdrawal rates will tend to occur after poor market returns when balances are lower. Meanwhile, lower sustainable withdrawal rates will be advisable after periods of good returns. This is weird, man. I just like that doesn't make any sense. So let's keep going. I'll show you why. It's also worth noting that criticisms of the 4% is untenable in a low yield world relate to starting withdrawal rates. The worry is that if the retiree takes 4% of his balance in year one, then subsists on that same amount with inflation adjustments in subsequent years, he runs the risk of prematurely depleting his money over 25 to 30 years. The reason is that such a system doesn't factor in the portfolio's value as the years go by. It does, Christine. I'm contrarian. Everyone's saying we're going to substitute he for she now because seeing he is patriarchal, is a patriarchal. Patriarchal. And I'm going back to that. I'm bringing it back. I'm bringing it back to the old way of talking. You say he, you say yes, ma'am, yes, sir, no, ma'am, no, sir. You say he instead of she. You can say both, that's fine, but it's just weird how everyone says she now because they want to show they're cool. If she encounters big losses, and I just dropped it. If he encounters big losses in his portfolio, but blithely, is it blithely or blithely? I think it's blithely, keeps taking in the same dollar amount, that will lead to too high withdrawals rate and an inopportune time. That risk is particularly great in the early years of retirement. For example, let's say a retiree would take in a fixed withdrawal rate from $1 million portfolio, starting with a 4% initially and adjusting for inflation. Her year one withdrawal would be $40,000. Year two would be right back in the same ballpark, perhaps a bit higher if she takes her inflation. Behind the scenes, her portfolio could have dropped to $700,000 in year two, bringing her actual withdrawal rate to 5.9% a year. That year. She maintained her standard of living, but did so at her portfolio sustainability. In practice, retirees may be able to be more flexible with their withdrawals, taking more in stronger environments and less in weak ones. But much of the latest research around sustainable withdrawal rates points to the benefits of flexibility for retirees. All right, that doesn't make any sense, man. The whole Christine has to know this. The issue is when you're running these numbers, you're not just doing it in a linear, you're doing it based on historical data where the market is going up and down, up and down. I mean, that's what Monte Carlo does. It's not a linear rate of return. You're saying 4%. If you're not, I don't get why she's saying that. I mean, of course, the 4% rule is contingent on the market's going up, the market's going down. It is completely recognizes that some years are going to take 5.9% and other years are going to take 2%. I'm stunned. I was like, that doesn't make any sense. No one's sitting there saying you're going to take that. It's not based on market valuations. That of course it is. If it were not based on market valuations, then you could take 8% a year off because the stocks have averaged 10% a year. But that's not how it works. Because some years you're going to take 5.9, a la 2008. Some years are going to take, well, probably last year, 3.2 because the markets are so up. I was like, what? Got a lot of work yet to do, my friends, because there's a lot of misinformation. I don't, this whole thing, let me read this again. It's nuts. I'm sitting there thinking it makes no sense. The worry is that a retiree takes 4% of her balance in year one and then subsists on that same amount. In subsequent years, she runs too high a risk of prematurely depleting her money. The reason is that such a system doesn't factor in the portfolio's value as the years go by. If she encounters big losses in her portfolio but keeps taking out the same dollar amount, that will lead to a too high withdrawal rates at an inopportune time. No, that's not. The reason is we say we're using the 4% because we ran whatever it was from 1926 to 1992, I think is when Bengen did it. And then the Trinity study did the same thing. They said they ran these safe withdrawal rates based on rates of return. And they said, this is what happens. If you would have run this, you would have been able to take 4 to 4.4% safely without ever running out of money. That goes down and up years. Oh, the weirdest thing, man. Yes, so she's taking 5.9% that year. That was included in the study. And that's why it's too bad they don't have comments. That's just odd. But anyway, that didn't really give me a whole lot of optimism. I mean, I get what she's saying. It's good news because you're taking... This again, the whole point. It's good news because your portfolio is now $1 million, whereas before it was $800,000. So you're taking a lower withdrawal rate because the portfolio is higher. Well, yeah, but then when the portfolio goes down, you're taking a higher withdrawal rate. That's part of the 4% rule, or whatever the safe withdrawal rate is that people want to use. This is a strange article. Anyway, I'll put a link in the show notes. Love to hear your thoughts on that. All right, we'll see you.